People think being a detective in a small town is all traffic tickets and stolen lawn chairs, quiet nights, old-timers waving from their porches, maybe the occasional drunk kid flipping his dad's ATV into a ditch. That's what I thought too, before I got transferred to Maple Hollow. They sent me there after some heat on a case I botched in Redfield. Internal Affairs wanted me out of sight, so they buried me in this forgotten place upstate. No crime scene tape, no reporters, no noise. Just endless woods, gravel roads, and people who don't answer questions unless you've lived there for 20 years. First thing I noticed was how the trees moved. Not the wind, I mean the trees themselves. How they leaned when you looked away. How the air felt heavier when you stood still too long. No one talks about it. Not the sheriff, not the locals. But you feel it, like the town is holding its breath, watching. I got a desk in a back room of Town Hall, wedged between a broken soda machine and an old fax line no one had unplugged since the 90s. My office heater coughed dust. The filing cabinets were filled with half-finished reports and cold cases older than me. They told me I'd probably be bored out here. Said Maple Hollow didn't get much real crime. Bullshit. In my first 4 months, I opened 5 active missing persons cases, all locals, all vanished without warning. No signs of struggle, no ransom notes, no patterns. Just gone. The old-timers call it the Hollow's way. They shrug and say, some folks just wander off. That's it. That's all you'll get out of them. But I kept digging, and the deeper I went, the more I felt it. That crawling unease you can't quite name, like something pressing against your skin from the inside. So I started writing it all down. Every weird detail, every quiet whisper, every time my flashlight flickered for no reason. 5 cases, 5 stories. Some ended, some didn't, but they all stayed with me. Let me start with the one that broke me in. The call came in on a cold Wednesday morning, late October, just before Halloween. The leaves had already fallen, and the sky had that dull gray look that makes everything feel half dead. I remember because I was halfway through a cup of gas station coffee when the dispatcher buzzed in. Got a missing kid, 8 years old. Farm property out by Clearwater. Darlene Wyatt was the mother, lived alone with her son Milo. Her place sat way out on the edge of town. Dirt road, sagging porch, rusted-out tractor in the front yard. She sounded panicked on the phone, but not screaming. More like she was holding her breath the whole time. I got there 15 minutes after the deputy. Darlene met me on the porch in her bathrobe, shaking like she hadn't felt her body since sunrise. Her hands were covered in straw and dirt. Said she went out to feed the goats, just 10 minutes, and when she came back in, Milo was gone. He was watching his cartoons, she kept saying, eating his cereal. He doesn't just leave, he knows better. Inside, the house was eerily still. The TV was frozen on a paused screen of some cartoon fox mid-jump. Bowl of cereal on the coffee table, milk still cold, spoon sticking out like he'd just put it down. No spills, no mess, just empty. The doors were all locked, windows shut, no signs of anyone coming in or out. But there was something strange about the back screen door. The handle had this dark smudge on it, like melted plastic or tar. I touched it with my pen. It was sticky, almost warm. We combed the area all day. The dogs picked up a scent trail that ran out behind the goat pen and into the woods. But they stopped cold about 50 yards in. Wouldn't go further. One of the handlers said they started whining and pulling back, which was odd. They're trained to press forward. But these dogs turned around, tail between their legs, refused to move another inch. That night I stayed at the house. Something didn't sit right with me. I've seen kidnappings before. You usually find something, torn fabric, footprints, a broken latch. But this was clean, too clean. Around midnight, I sat in the living room staring at that bowl of cereal when I noticed something out of place. A faint trail on the floorboards, not quite a smear, more like a drag mark, just one, leading from the couch across the floor, right to the closet under the stairs. I opened it up, just coats and old boots, but the back wall looked wrong. The texture was off, lumpy, uneven, like it had been painted over in a hurry. I knocked. Hollow. Grabbed my multi-tool and started chipping. Behind that false wall was a crawl space, dusty, cobwebbed, and inside, neatly folded, was a child's blanket, blue, with faded rocket ships. Darlene said it was Milo's favorite. Next to it was a little plastic recorder, one of those cheap voice memo toys, the kind you buy for $9 at a gas station. I pressed play. The audio was warped, scratchy, but I heard Milo's voice. He was crying, whimpering like a scared animal. Then, in the background, a whisper, not loud, not sharp, just wrong.
He followed the tapping. He followed it home.
That's all it said. We searched every inch of that farm over the next week. Volunteers, drones, heat sensors. Nothing. No sign of Milo. Not a shoe, not a hair. It was like he got pulled through a hole in the world and never touched the ground. 2 weeks later, I got the call from dispatch again. Darlene had been found in the barn, hanging from the rafter over the milking stall. Her suicide note was one sentence, scrawled on the back of an overdue electric bill. He's in the walls. They closed the case, no suspects. Officially ruled a runaway and a suicide. That's how small towns survive. They put ugly things in file cabinets and lock them shut. But I kept the recorder. Sometimes I play it late at night when I can't sleep. That voice, that whisper, it didn't sound like something coming through a wall. It sounded like it was inside the damn recorder. That was the first time Maple Hollow sank its teeth in, and it wasn't the last. You'd think after losing a kid like that, I'd be more cautious going forward, keep things professional, keep my distance. But Maple Hollow didn't really give me a choice. Once the town had you, it didn't let go. And after the Wyatt case, things started coming in faster. Calls that didn't make sense, people reporting things they didn't want written down. I kept working. What else was I supposed to do? The next one came from a stretch of road the locals called Juniper Crossing. It's a crooked, tree-lined patch of highway that connects Maple Hollow to the next town over, though most people avoid it after dark. Too many blind turns. Too many stories. The report was simple. A woman named Leslie Harrow, mid-30s, had gone missing while walking home from a friend's house 2 nights prior. Car had broken down, and she'd decided to walk the rest of the way, just 2 miles. She never made it. Her friend called it in the next morning when Leslie's phone went straight to voicemail and she wasn't answering her door. By the time I arrived at the last place she was seen, the sun was going down. The air was thick with mist, low fog rolling in through the trees like it had been poured there on purpose. I parked the cruiser just past mile marker 19 and got out. The road was quiet, still. I started walking the shoulder, flashlights sweeping the edge of the brush. I wasn't more than 10 minutes in when I saw the shoe, left sneaker, just off the road. Still white, no dirt on it. Looked like it had been placed there, not dropped, not kicked. Something about it set me on edge. I called for backup, but radio reception out there was garbage. All I got was static. So I kept going. About 30 yards in, the forest started to shift. The sound changed. I don't know how to explain it. Like the background noise you never notice had vanished. No crickets, no wind. Even the leaves underfoot felt muffled. I slowed down, flashlight scanning ahead, and that's when I saw her. Leslie, standing barefoot in the middle of the road wearing a nightgown soaked to the knees. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, like she was sleepwalking. Her hair was matted. Her skin was pale, but she didn't look injured, just wrong, like she'd been pulled through something she didn't fully understand. I called her name. She didn't answer. I took a cautious step forward, hand hovering near my holster. Not because I felt threatened, but because every instinct in me was screaming that something was off. The way she stood, the way her head tilted slightly as if listening to something I couldn't hear, it set off every red flag I had. When I got close enough, I gently touched her arm. Her skin was freezing. I asked her if she was okay. She looked at me, real slow, and blinked like she'd just noticed I was there. Then she started crying, soft at first, then full body sobbing, like something deep inside had finally snapped. I wrapped her in my jacket, radioed in again, and this time got through. EMTs met us a half hour later and took her in for evaluation. Physically, she was fine. No injuries, no drugs in her system, just severely dehydrated and in shock. It was only later, after I drove back into town and filled out the report, that I got the full story. Leslie said she never made it past the woods. She said she saw something in the trees, a light, flickering like a lantern swaying back and forth between the branches. She assumed it was someone trying to help. She called out, followed it off the road, thought it was a park ranger or a neighbor with a flashlight. But the light never stopped moving. It kept drifting deeper. And something about the way it moved, it wasn't right. Too smooth, too quiet. It didn't bounce like a real lantern. It floated, like it was waiting. She said the deeper she went, the harder it got to turn around. Not physically, mentally, like her own thoughts weren't working right. She said she'd forget why she was out there, forget her name, forget what direction she came from. She'd walk in circles, only to end up in a completely different place. Hours passed without her noticing. At one point, she remembered sitting down by a dead tree, crying. That's when she heard someone whisper her name. Not shout, whisper. Soft and close, too close. But when she looked up, there was nothing. No one. She said the trees were all wrong. They twisted when she looked away. Their bark changed color. The sky went from night to twilight without the sun ever rising. And then, she said something touched her shoulder. She never saw what it was, just felt it. Cold, wet, fingernails like broken glass. She woke up standing in the road, right where I found her. Now, normally, I'd chalk that up to trauma. Maybe hallucinations brought on by panic and dehydration. People imagine strange things when they're afraid. But here's the part I can't shake. When the paramedics took Leslie's vitals, her feet were pristine, not scratched, not dirty, not even cold burns from walking barefoot for hours. And that part of the woods? We searched it the next morning. 3 deputies, a tracker, and me. We didn't find footprints, no disturbed leaves. Not even the tree Leslie said she sat under. It was like none of it had happened. But then, right at the edge of the clearing where I found her, we found the lantern. Old, rusted, unlit. It wasn't broken, just old, covered in moss and spider webs, like it had been sitting there for years. Leslie moved out of town a month later, didn't leave a number, didn't say goodbye, just packed up and vanished. Her house is still empty, overgrown grass, porch light still busted. I drive past it sometimes. The curtain in the upstairs bedroom still moves, even when the windows are shut. Case 2 didn't have a body, didn't have blood, but it scared me more than most murders ever could, because it proved something I hadn't wanted to believe. In Maple Hollow, people don't just go missing. Sometimes they come back, and they're never quite the same. By the time I got to the 3rd case, I'd stopped asking questions out loud. People in Maple Hollow don't like being pressed. They'll look at you with those tired, glassy eyes and say things like, "It's just the woods," or "Some folks don't want to be found." But they never tell you the whole truth, not directly. They whisper it sideways, through pauses, through the things they leave out. and I'd started learning how to listen between the lines. The third case came in during spring. Snow was melting, the river had swelled, and the ground was soft enough that every step left a print behind. I got the call just after noon. A local teacher, Martin Glasser, hadn't shown up for work in 2 days. His wife, June, reported him missing, said he'd gone for his usual morning jog down by the Riverside Trail and never came home. I remember how calm she was on the phone, not frantic, not angry, like she already knew something no one else did. I drove straight to the trailhead, which runs behind the old paper mill that shut down back in '91. It's mostly used by dog walkers and joggers now, but the water's fast and deep this time of year. If someone slips, there's no chance of swimming out. We found Martin's car parked right where his wife said it would be. Keys still in the cup holder, gym towel draped over the seat. The windows were fogged from the morning chill. Looked like it hadn't been touched. I followed the trail down past the mill ruins, boots sinking slightly in the soft ground. You could hear the river roaring nearby, louder than usual. After about a half mile, I saw the first clue. Shoe prints, running shoes, male-sized, headed toward the water, but there weren't any prints coming back. I followed them down a slope, where the trees thinned out and the river came into view. Fast current, muddy water. A large rock jutted out into the edge like a natural dock. And there, at the tip of it, were 2 footprints, side by side, like someone had walked to the edge and stopped. Then nothing. No slip marks, no drag, no splash zone, no body. Just 2 perfect footprints pointing toward the water. We sent a diver team in. They searched for 3 days. Found some old fishing gear, a few soda cans, and the rusted-out frame of a bicycle. But no Martin. Not a trace. The official story was that he fell in and got swept downstream. The current could have carried him for miles. It was possible, but something didn't add up. 2 days after we stopped the search, I went by the Glasser house to drop off some paperwork. June invited me in, polite, stiff, like someone hosting a guest at a wake. The living room was spotless, no photos on the mantel, just a single cup of coffee steaming on the table. "I made 2 cups," she said. Out of habit, I guess. We sat in silence for a bit. I glanced around, looking for anything, any clue, any weird detail. That's when I noticed the painting on the wall above the fireplace. It showed the river, the same rock ledge where the footprints were found. But the weird part? There was a figure in the painting, a man standing on the edge, facing the water. The same stance, the same posture. But the man wasn't Martin, not exactly. His proportions were off, arms too long, back slightly hunched, and the head, bald, featureless, smooth like clay. I asked her where she got the painting. She blinked at me like she didn't know what I was talking about. "That's always been there," she said. But when I came to interview her the first day, I remembered that wall being empty. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Something about those footprints, about the way she said it, that's always been there. It stuck in my head. So I pulled the case file out and flipped through Martin's journal entries, which his wife had handed over voluntarily. Most of it was boring. Grocery lists, workout notes, casual stuff. Until the last page. Scrawled in rushed handwriting, no date. "It's not a reflection. It watches me from the water. Every morning, it's closer." I stared at that sentence for a long time. It didn't make sense, but it matched something I hadn't told anyone. The morning I found Martin's footprints, the river was perfectly still for a few seconds, right before the wind picked up. And just before that moment passed, I saw something under the surface. A shape. Tall. Still. Facing up toward the sky. I thought it was a log, or maybe a shadow from the trees, but it didn't move with the current. It just watched. I tried to forget that part. Wrote it off as stress, as imagination. But then 2 weeks later, I got another call. A man named Franklin Daly, retired fireman, said he'd seen something in the river while fishing near the same stretch. He was standing there, Franklin said over the phone, just below the surface, about 10 feet out, arms at his side, looking up at me. I asked if he saw a face. He didn't pause. No face. Just smooth, like wet stone. We sent divers again, found nothing. But the next morning, Franklin Daly packed up his trailer and left town without saying goodbye, left his boat behind, his dog, his clothes. People said he cracked. That retirement made him soft. But I saw the look on his face when I interviewed him. He wasn't confused. He was afraid. Whatever he saw in that water, it followed him home. I went back to that rock one last time, a month after Martin disappeared, just to look, just to put it to rest. The river was quiet, sunlight bouncing off the surface in little gold streaks. I stepped out to the edge, and there, right next to the 2 faded footprints we'd marked in chalk a month ago, were 2 more. Same size, same shoes, pointed back toward the trail, like someone had returned. Case 3 is still open. Martin Glasser is still missing. But if you ask me, he didn't drown. He walked in, and something walked out. By the time the 4th case landed on my desk, I'd developed a new routine. Every night before bed, I locked every door twice. I checked the back window, always the back one, always twice, and made sure my bedside lamp had a spare bulb. I started keeping a notebook beside me too, for details, names, things that might slip if I didn't write them down right away. Maple Hollow doesn't feel like a town. It feels like a thing, and once it notices you, you're always under its skin. The 4th case started with a letter. No return address, just a name at the bottom in shaky blue ink. Eleanor Rourke. She said she needed someone to investigate her house, that strange things were happening at night. Sounds in the walls, lights flickering. She said her husband had been dead for 8 years, but she still heard him walking down the upstairs hallway after midnight. And then the line that really hit me. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid he'll take me with him when he goes again. Normally I'd dismiss something like that. Old lady, maybe living alone too long. But the thing is, I knew the name. Eleanor's husband, Arthur Rourke, had been a local handyman. Died of a heart attack while repairing a 2nd-story window in his own house. Fell backward off a ladder and cracked his skull on the garden stones below. It was a tragic accident, but open and shut, until she wrote that letter. I drove out to Ember Lane the next morning. It's not even on the town map anymore, just a gravel loop buried behind the hills where trees grow thick and hang heavy over the road like they're trying to hide something. The Rourke house sat at the end, leaning slightly to one side like it had been through a long, bitter winter. The porch steps bowed under my weight. The bell didn't work, so I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Louder. Nothing. Then I noticed the front door wasn't latched. It creaked open with one soft push. Mrs. Rourke? I called. It's Detective Langley. You sent me a letter? Still nothing. I stepped inside. The air hit me right away. Cold, damp, like a basement that hadn't seen daylight in years. The house smelled like rotting wood and something else I couldn't place. Not mildew, not death. Something in between. The living room was neat, cozy even. Old furniture covered in plastic, floral wallpaper yellowed at the edges, a teacup still half full on the coffee table, dust crusted around the rim. I moved carefully, checking each room, the kitchen, the dining area. Nothing. Then I saw the staircase. It went up into complete blackness, no light bulbs working, no ambient sunlight filtering through the upstairs windows. It was like the 2nd floor had been swallowed. I hesitated at the bottom step. There was a feeling there. Not fear, exactly. More like resistance. Like the house didn't want me going any farther. But I'd come this far. I took the steps slow, one at a time, my flashlight barely cutting through the darkness. The hallway upstairs stretched long and narrow, doors lining both sides, all shut. I tried the first door, locked, second, locked, third, opened halfway before something stopped it, not jammed, blocked, like furniture had been shoved up against it. And then I heard it, footsteps above me. There was no attic in the house. I'd seen the blueprints in the records file, but the sound was unmistakable, shuffling steps, slow and steady, directly over my head. And then a knock, 3 sharp knocks, right above me. I backed out of the hallway and turned to go back downstairs, already reaching for my radio. But standing at the top of the stairs was Eleanor. She looked wrong. Her skin was pale and stretched, her eyes glassy and unfocused. She didn't blink, just looked at me and said, "I didn't let him in. I never opened the door." I took a slow breath, tried to keep my voice steady. "Mrs. Rourke, I got your letter. Are you all right?" She didn't answer, just turned and started walking down the hallway, stopping in front of the last door. "He talks to me from in here," she whispered. "But it's not his voice anymore." She opened the door and stepped inside. I followed. The room was cold enough to see my breath. The curtains were drawn, and the bed was made, military tight. On the nightstand sat a photo of Arthur Rourke, young, smiling, his hand on Eleanor's shoulder. She stood beside the bed, staring at the wall opposite. That's when I noticed the marks, scratches, dozens of them, running floor to ceiling in 4 long rows, dug deep into the plaster, like someone, or something, had been trying to claw its way through. "He wants to come back," she said, "but there's no place for him anymore." I reached out gently, but she flinched away. Then she turned to me and whispered, "He says you shouldn't be here." The temperature in the room dropped so suddenly I felt my lungs freeze. My flashlight flickered. And then, clear as anything, I heard a voice behind me, low, raspy.
"Get out."
I spun, but there was no one there. When I turned back, Eleanor was sitting on the bed, her eyes closed, lips moving silently. I backed out of the room. I called for backup, medics, anyone. I waited outside. I didn't go back in until the others arrived. Eleanor didn't speak again. They took her to a care facility upstate. Catatonic. No diagnosis, just gone inside. Like something had reached in and flipped a switch. I got a warrant to inspect the house further. We found something in the wall behind the claw marks. A hole, sealed with bricks and concrete. Inside. Nothing. Just a small wooden stool and the remains of a candle melted down to a stump. The weird part? The wax was fresh. No dust, no cobwebs. Like someone had been using it. Recently. The official record says Eleanor suffered a mental breakdown, hallucinations, a grief spiral that finally broke her 8 years after her husband's death. But I still hear that voice, clear, unmistakable.
"Get out."
Case 4 wasn't about something breaking in. It was about something never leaving. There's a reason I saved this one for last. I've tried to forget it, shove it down with the rest, drown it with bourbon and silence. But it keeps clawing its way back, like it knows I'm still trying to bury it. This is the one that changed everything for me. Locals call it the Old Pines Schoolhouse. It's not listed on any town map. You won't find it on Google Earth either, even if you get the coordinates exactly right. It's tucked up in the hills behind Briar Ridge, buried deep in the forest where the roads stop making sense. Some say it was built in the 1920s for logging camp kids. Others say it was a church or something darker. Most people just pretend it doesn't exist at all. But I got a call about it. This was 6 months after the Rourke case. Things had gone quiet for a while, almost like the town was letting me breathe. I was starting to think I'd imagined half of what I'd seen. Then a local named Greg Warren showed up at the station with a look in his eyes I'll never forget. Wild, pale, like someone who'd just survived something unnatural and couldn't quite believe it. "I found a girl," he said, "out near the pines." He said he was out hiking, off trail, looking for mushrooms, hadn't seen another soul all day. Then he heard a voice, high, soft, singing. He followed it until he came to a clearing, and there it was, a building, small, wooden, faded red paint flaking off the sides. No doors, just an open doorway leading into the dark, and standing just outside the doorway, facing the trees, was a girl, maybe 10 years old, wearing a white dress, bare feet caked in mud. She didn't speak when he approached, just looked at him, tilted her head, and pointed into the schoolhouse. He didn't go in. He turned and ran. And the part that stuck with me? When I asked what the girl said, if anything at all, he nodded, like it had just come back to him. She said, "We're not supposed to leave until the bell rings." That same day, I drove up Briar Ridge, parked where the trail ran cold, and hiked the rest. Took me 2 hours to find it. The pines were packed so tight I could barely see the sky. The air smelled like old wood and iron. And then, just like that, there it was, the schoolhouse. It looked exactly like Greg described. Weather-beaten, sagging roof, faded paint. But what got me was how new the clearing felt. The grass was trampled, recent, like someone or something had been walking there often. I stepped inside. It wasn't big. One room, desks bolted to the floor, maybe a dozen in total. All child-sized. Chalkboard at the front, cracked and half erased. There were names scratched into the wood of the desks. Some in cursive, some in block letters. First names only. Bethany, Marcus, Ty, Lucy. And in the back corner of the room sat a bell. Not a school bell, a handbell. Old brass, thick handle. It looked clean, untouched by time. That's the best way I can put it. Like it had been set there just moments before I walked in. The air in the room shifted as I stared at it, got heavier. I couldn't explain why, but every instinct screamed, "Don't ring it." Whatever happened here, whatever had happened for decades, it started and ended with that bell. I took a photo, wrote notes, marked the spot on my GPS. Then I left, fast, didn't look back. But that wasn't the end. 2 nights later, I was at home, halfway through a drink, when I heard it. A bell, clear, ringing, 3 times. I froze, looked at my clock, 2:43 a.m. I live alone. No kids on my street, no schools for miles. I stepped outside. The air was still. No wind, no movement. But there, at the end of my driveway, was a small handprint in the dirt. Just one. The next day, I went back to the schoolhouse. It was gone. The clearing was still there, but the building, the desks, the bell, the chalkboard, nothing remained. Just disturbed soil and a faint smell of iron. I searched the area for hours. Nothing. Not a board, not a nail. But when I checked my GPS, still marked. I opened the photo I'd taken. It was black. Just black. Every shot I'd taken was corrupted, just empty frames of static. I went to file a report, but something stopped me. The way the girl had stood, pointing at the doorway. The way Greg said she sang, like she wasn't really there but remembering something from long ago. So I dug, went through old town records, library archives, handwritten ledgers. Found something. Back in 1934, a school out near Briar Ridge was closed after an accident. Fire, supposedly, killed 12 children and 1 teacher. Bodies never recovered. No graves. The land was declared unfit for development. The records end there. But scribbled in the margins of the last page was a note. Bell must not ring. If they hear it, they'll wake up again. I haven't heard the bell since that night, but sometimes in the woods behind my house I hear singing. In a language I don't understand. I don't go looking anymore. Case 5 has no suspect, no body, no proper file, but I know what I saw. And I know this. There are places in Maple Hollow where time doesn't work the way it should, where echoes wear skin, where you can get trapped between a moment that's passed and one that hasn't happened yet. The children never left. They're still waiting for the bell to ring. I keep all the reports locked in the bottom drawer of my desk, the official ones, clean, sanitized, signed, and stamped, the kind that explain everything away in language that makes it easier to forget. Accidental drowning, mental illness, foul play, unknown causes. But in my closet behind a false panel, there's a second box. My box, the real reports. Notes I never filed. Photos that didn't develop right. Audio tapes with whispers you can't hear unless you're alone, with the lights off. I didn't write them for the department. I wrote them for me, so I wouldn't forget. Because that's how Maple Hollow gets you. Not with screams or blood or monsters in the dark. It erodes you. Memory first, then reason, then the part of you that keeps fighting back. Most of the time I feel like I'm already half swallowed. Like my shadow doesn't move quite right anymore. Like I forget things I shouldn't. Important things. Names. Faces. Whole conversations vanish and people I remember being dead show up on the sidewalk like nothing ever happened. But then I'll open that box and read my own handwriting and know I'm still here. Still holding the line, however thin. There's one last thing I need to tell you. One final case. Not a missing person. Not a haunted house or twisted trail or creature in the river. Me. I'm the case now. It started 2 weeks after the schoolhouse vanished. I woke up with mud on my shoes. No memory of how I got there. No signs of forced entry in the house. My gun still holstered. Radio still on the nightstand. But my boots were wet, caked with pine needles. And in my pocket, a bell. Not a school bell. The bell. Same handle, same brass tone, same weight, but cracked down the middle like it had been dropped from a great height. I threw it out the same day. Tossed it in a ravine deep behind the station where no one goes. Didn't even look back. The next morning, it was on my kitchen table, sitting beside a cup of black coffee, still steaming. I haven't slept right since. I started hearing things in the station after hours, tapping in the vents, doors closing when no one else is around. I thought it was stress. Maybe all the cases finally catching up. PTSD, maybe. I saw a shrink. She was polite, careful, gave me pills, said it was cumulative psychological trauma exacerbated by isolation. I didn't tell her about the handprint that appears on my rear window every night after midnight, or that I started seeing people from the old cases, not just in dreams, in town. A week ago, I saw Leslie Harrow, case 2. She was standing outside the pharmacy, dressed the same as when I found her on the road, staring at me with eyes like blown glass. When I blinked, she was gone. 3 nights ago, I saw Milo Wyatt, the missing boy from the first case, in my backyard, staring at the house. His mouth was moving, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. He vanished when I opened the door. I told myself it was hallucinations, my brain fraying at the edges, blending memory with guilt, until this morning. When I walked into the station, the deputy on the desk, young guy, name's Corbin, looked at me like he saw a ghost. "You good?" he asked. I nodded. "You look different," he said. "Like thinner." I weighed myself later. I'd lost 12 pounds in 3 days. And the weirdest part, my badge number had changed. Not in the system, not in the files. On my badge, stamped clean, a different number, one I don't recognize. I went to my house, checked my ID, my mail. All matched the new badge number. Then I opened the bottom drawer, the real reports, my notes, all blank. same handwriting, same date stamps. But the pages were empty. No names, no cases, just page after page of blank lines and a single phrase written over and over at the bottom margin. This town remembers. I don't know how it got there. I don't remember writing it. I don't know if I'm dying or slipping into something worse. If I had to guess, Maple Hollow doesn't just keep its secrets. It uses them, builds on them. It pulls people in, lets them see just enough to get scared, then starts twisting reality around them until they don't know what's real anymore. Until they forget what matters, who they are, why they came. Maybe it doesn't kill people. Maybe it absorbs them, turns them into echoes. That's what I feel like now, an echo of myself, walking the same streets, drinking the same bitter coffee, talking to people I'm not sure were ever really here. But I'm writing this because I still have enough of myself left to fight, enough to warn someone, anyone. Maple Hollow is not haunted. It's hungry, and it's patient. If you ever find yourself passing through and your GPS flickers and says recalculating for too long, and you see a sign that says, "Welcome to Maple Hollow," do not stop. Do not get out. Do not follow any sound you can't explain. Don't answer when someone calls your name, especially if they say it the way your mother did. Don't trust the maps, and for the love of God, do not ring the bell.